coming to you from the Theodore Jason studio, located in the south wing of the Shlomi Yehuda Memorial Building, presented by Unlimited Bag and Supply, live from Phoenix, Arizona. Welcome to Melava Malka Learning with your host, Yisrael Boykin, coming to you from the Theodore Jason studio, located in the south wing of the Shlomi Yehuda Memorial Building, presented by Unlimited Bag and Supply, live from Phoenix, Arizona. Welcome to Melava Malka Learning with your host, Yisrael Boykin, coming to you. How y'all living out here? Bless the Lord, oh my soul, that's within me. Bless his holy name. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable for you, God, my strength and my redeemer. Very exciting to be here with you. As always, we begin with a special blessing for the children. Today, as we sat in Farbrengen at Shabbat services, I sat and watched a young boy today, and he literally just stood on top of the chair, and he wanted to give over these huge, remarkable words of Torah. And they looked at him like he was crazy. And they kept interrupting him. And, they were asking him questions. They're like, so what is the Torah portion? And he said, this week in Torah portion, Vayas Kanan. And I was blown away. I was like, they called him on his stuff and he gave him the answer. And so he gave his first, pointing his davar. And they wanted to ask him. Well, they were like, so what happened then? And he had to answer again. And he gave another line. They asked him another question. I like that little boy because he answered. He said, I don't know. This boy I don't think he could have been 3 years old. Literally mamish. And in our learning, we learned that Hashem wants to and is going to, the kids are going to be able to see Geula. May we allow them to show us. That is the blessing for the children, that as you see it, we bless and ask your parents that we should be able to just see it with you. And together we should all walk upwards into a heavenly and amazing era. We should know right now that God is moving in the most amazing way. And we should know that whatever the trials and circumstances are in our life, that they are fueling us and bringing us as a catalyst to a very great place. And through our teshuvah, as we were learning this week, through our return and our ability to just have this innate desire and ability that's inside of us that calls us to our Creator and helps us see our actions. May we all just be able to see in the most amazing way very great things. The children are permitted to leave the room at this point. Our time is semi-limited, so let us go right inside. Tonight we're going to be learning, as usual, the Sichos in English is our main program and our main learning here for Melava Malka Learning. And Eikev number 3, we are currently in the book of Devarim. There are 5 books in Torah, okay? Breshis, Shmois, Vayikra, Bamidbar, and Devarim. That's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy is Devarim. We're in the 11th chapter and the 20th verse. If it is your practice, please say L'chaim. We say L'chaim for life, even just a small drop, so that we could perhaps just maybe drop and lower our inhibitions and try to come together in intimacy and oneness and creation and godliness and just togetherness, l'chaim, the opportunity that we have in this life that we can elevate things and go in a forward manner, things that we will not be able to do beyond this veil. L'chaim, l'chaim. May we all bring down godly light and the pleasant and beautiful ability that we have. You know, today we were talking about the fact that on Rosh Hashanah, not that we're there yet, but quickly approaching, where God's, it's not his desire for this world, but maybe we literally kind of make God change his mind to let the world continue to be what it is. And all it takes is for the Jewish people to ask God to sit on the throne. Now, the concept that's brought down is now like a father, okay? A father, when he has children, he can get down onto the floor and play a silly, imaginative game with his children on the floor and be completely subsumed inside of this game with his children. But when the phone rings or business calls, you know, a daddy has to get up and he handles his business and comes out of that imaginary world and he answers his phone. Now, the concept is for God to sit on his throne as the God of the universe. The Most High God has to sit down. It's a lowering of himself. So we're grateful that God wanted and had this will and desire to create what we call the Dira B'Taktonim, a dwelling place in the lower worlds for whatever that his will and desire may be. And we're grateful for our ability to be part of that plan and to experience this along. L'chaim, l'chaim, for peace, for blessing, for whatever salvations that you need in your life right now. May the words of my mouth and meditation of my heart be acceptable for you, O God, my strength and my redeemer. L'chaim. The introduction here. It begins here saying that certain sichas, these sichos, these speeches, these talks, there's the maimarim, then there's the talks. Certain of these sichas, these sichos, are important not only for their content, but also for their historical significance. The Sikha to follow here was prepared for publication in the wake of the terrorist attack in 5736. This was in the year 1976. And Ma'alot Eretz Yisrael, where 25 children from a school in Sfas were brutally slain. We see in the Sikos of Shabbos Parshas Matos and Masai in the 29th of Tammuz and Shabbos Parshas Chazon 5736 when the Rebbe spoke about this matter in length. But in the process of comforting the mourning families, Lubavitch rabbis from Sfas checked the mezuzos. It's a scroll that goes on the door where we learn this in the book of Deuteronomy to place this scroll on the door. So the Lubavitch rabbis there in Sfas and Israel, they checked these scrolls, the mezuzos of their home, and found them to be flawed. They informed the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, of blessed memory, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, of this, and the Rebbe delivered several sichos, emphasizing the protective power of a mezuzah. I wish I had one in hand that I could show you right now, but you have AI and every other good gift from the Lord, and they should be in your home. And let's see how you're feeling about it at the end of here, because the Rebbe wants to bring out some points. Now it says here that certain rabbinical authorities objected to the Rebbe's words, maintaining that people should not be encouraged to affix these mezuzos for the sake of the protection they offer. In response, the Rebbe had the following sikha prepared, in which an explanation of a mezuzah's protective qualities is coupled with sikhos that the Rebbe had previously delivered, presenting an analytic discussion of why observing a mitzvah, this commandment of God, this ability to bring godly light into the world for the sake of protection, is not only sanctioned by our sages, but encouraged. Let's begin. A divine protective shield for the protection of our homes. We'd like to continue to thanks SIE in English for the wonderful work, and founder Yona Asfen. May your neshama continue to have an aliyah, and may all your family continue in great work. And thank you for this vision that God has given you, that we could share in these things together. Number one, for the protection of our homes. In this week's Parsha, Deuteronomy 11th chapter 20th verse, Devarim the Torah couples the command to affix a mezuzah. You shall write them on the posts of your home and your gates, with the promise of a reward for the fulfillment of the mitzvah, stating directly afterwards in the 11th chapter 21st verse, so that your days and the days of your descendants will be lengthened. Very interestingly enough, we also find one way to lengthen our days is by honoring our father and our mother, which is what we learned in this week's Torah portion. But continuing along here, it says the connection between the mitzvah and its reward is cited as a halachic ruling in the Shulchan Aruch. And this is in Yarei De'eh 285:1. It's saying this concept is also stated in the Torah, which adds an even greater than this, i.e. meriting long life. The house is protected as a result of the mezuzah. Beis Yosef offers two impressions why protecting a person's home is considered greater than a long life. Firstly, although lengthening a person's life is miraculous, it is ongoing and thus not overtly apparent. By contrast, protecting the inhabitants of a home from harm is a revealed miracle. And the second interpretation is that instead of a subject guarding the king's home, the king is guarding the home of his subjects. Says even according to the second interpretation, the rationale is mentioned second because it's not sufficient in people's eyes to explain why protecting a person's home is greater than lengthening his life. Now, whoever is meticulous in the observance of this mitzvah will merit that his days and the days of his descendants be lengthened. And some of the Shulchan Aruch's words are source and Gemara, Shabbos 32b. Some analysis is necessary regarding the intent of the Sifsei Kohen 285.2, which quotes the proof text from the Torah. There are other mitzvahs, for example, honoring one's parents, like we were talking about. We see this in two different places in the book of Exodus, 20th chapter, 12th verse, and in the book of Deuteronomy, 5th chapter, 6th verse, and the like, as we see in the commentaries of this 11th chapter in Deuteronomy, 19th verse. So that your days be lengthened. This also applies to Torah study, which resemble the mitzvah of mezuzah in that the reward for observing the mitzvah is explicitly mentioned in the Torah together with the mitzvah. However, there is an additional dimension that applies regarding the mitzvah of mezuzah that is not found regarding other mitzvahs. Our sages state, and at Gemara Avodah Zarah 11a, we learn, it says, write my name and affix it to your entrance, as referring to God's name, it's Shaddai, which is written on the outside of the mezuzah and which serves as protection, as evidenced by the facts that its letters serve as an acronym, meaning guardian of the doors of Israel, this Shaddai, this, what's it say here? Shomar, Dilatat Yisrael. So commenting on that passage from the Zohar, Nitzutze Iros, based on Ramaz, interprets that statement as referring to the mezuzah as a whole, because the letters of that word, mezuzah, the mem, it's so small here in my Hebrew is struggling. The Zion, I can't even see how many letters this word has, is how small it is. Okay, Mem, Zion, Vav, Zion, Hey. As a whole, because the letters of that word, this 5-letter word, share the same numerical equivalent as God's name, as we would say it, Adonai. Okay. Lakute Levi Yitzchak does not negate that interpretation entirely. However, it states that the interpretation that the Zohar is referring to the name Shaddai seems more likely the Shaddai is like Shen Dalad Yod. Neither this word for mezuzah nor God's name Adonai are written in the mezuzah. How then could this be what the Zohar is referring to, saying, write my name? Nevertheless, Lakute Levi Yitzchak does not entirely negate the interpretation that is given here by this Nitzutze Oros. It could be said that there is also an advantage to the interpretation of this Nitzutze Oros, the straightforward understanding of the directive, write my name and affix it to your entrance, implies that it does not apply only to a specific aspect of mezuzah, God's name, Shaddai, or even the concept that the word Vahaya is written inside and God's name Shaddai is written on the outside, which together are numerically equivalent to this word Shem, which is name. And concerning the latter concept, Lakute Levi Yitzchak concludes, I later found this interpretation in Ramaz. Rather, the directive applies to the concept of the mezuzah as a whole. It is possible to connect this idea that the general concept of the mezuzah is identified with the instruction, write my name, that will lead to God's protecting the Jews, with the concept explained in the Siddur in the prayer book, Imdak, page 275b, that the mitzvah of mezuzah includes all of the mezuzahs and is equivalent to all the mitzvahs. The rationale is that it represents an encompassing light of a general nature. As such, it offers protection of an all-encompassing nature, protecting everything a person possesses. It is well known that the manifestation of godliness, referred to as a name in scriptures, referred to as light in the lexicon of the Zohar and the Kabbalahs. Now, light is of a general encompassing nature without distinction. Instead, such distinction is brought about by the kelim, I would say vessels, but here they're saying these conduits that contain and constrict these lights. So we have like light, and then there's like ore, and then that's what we call light, and then there's kelim, which is like these vessels. Okay, we learned through concepts, just to take a short segue, the concepts of like, here in this particular world, we have a lot of vessels and maybe not so much light. And as you proceed through this term, let's say, hopefully I got it right here, Seder HaHashtashalis, as you go through this chain-like progression, if we're building from the bottom, it's like the Most High God's light, and it comes down into these different worlds, but not any degradation, but like maybe a concealment, which we call something called Simsum. And ultimately, the higher as we are to God's light, there's like more light and less vessels, like kelim per se, or ability to be able to hold this light. But in this particular world, we have a lot of vessels and not so much light, but the light that's here is just as strong as the light shining from way above, where God is contracted and concealed, if you can. That manifestation is still overtly present in our world as we speak, which is the whole purpose of this broadcast, which is the whole purpose of us trying to learn with you, and the point that we are trying to bring out to you in the Lubavitcher Rebbe and the Rebbeim of Chabad are bringing down in these talks. Thank you for joining, and thank you for subscribing. So godliness referred to a name in scripture is referred to as light. The lexicon of this Zohar and the Kabbalahs. Now, light is of a general encompassing nature without distinction. Instead, such distinction is brought about by these vessels, all right? These conduits that contain and constrict these lights. Accordingly, the light elicited by the mezuzah, equivalent to the letters of God's name, is of a collective nature. Let us continue along here. A mortal king takes shelter inside, and his servants protect him outside, okay? You sleep securely in your beds, and the Holy One, blessed be He, protects you from the outside. The protection brought about by the mitzvah of mezuzah is not merely a reward for the observance of the mitzvah. Instead, it is, as stated by Bayesh Chadash, a benefit and profit from the actual mitzvah itself, in addition to its reward. With the statement of Bayesh Chadash explains the words of the Torah that the protection generated by the mezuzah is greater than the reward of long life promised by the Torah. For the protection generated by the mezuzah is a benefit derived from the actual mitzvah itself. Moreover, the protection generated by the mezuzah is not merely a peripheral benefit and profit, but rather it is a fundamental and a mitzvah of a mezuzah, as Tosafos states, in Nakos 44a. A mezuzah is made for protection. It says here in Kad Hakamak Erek Mezuzah, for this reason the Torah established the mitzvah of mezuzah for us, so that we bear in mind this fundamental principle that divine protection is afforded us and flows over us. And there's extensive explanations that are in that source continuing along here. Number 2, more than a reward. Because of the unique virtue of the mitzvah of mezuzah, that the actual mitzvah itself constitutes protection, there is a difference between the manner in which the mitzvah of mezuzah is observed and the manner in which the other mitzvahs are observed. As a whole, when the Torah states that the observance of the mitzvahs leads to a reward, the objective is not merely to teach a point of information. Instead, as indicated by the Torah, straightforward meaning regarding the standpoint of halakha and Chulin 110b, Talmud Yerushalmi, Bava Basra, at the end of chapter 5, both sources state that when the Torah explicitly associates the observance of mitzvahs with reward, a mortal court is not obligated to compel people to observe them. The reward is mentioned to reinforce and encourage the Jews' observance of the mitzvahs. We see in Rashi, Vayikra, in the book of Leviticus, in the 16th chapter, 1st verse, where he states that mentioning the punishment one receives for failing to observe a mitzvah strengthens a person's resolve to keep it. As our sages teach, Gemara Pasakim 50b and notes in the sources that are there, a person should always occupy himself with the Torah and its mitzvos, even when his intent is not for their sake. Rambam quotes this statement as halakha in Hilkos Teshuvah and states that the order of instructions must follow this pattern. And Rambam speaks of occupying oneself in Torah, as that's Talmud Yerushalmi and Gemara Chagiga 1:7. And however, Pasakim increases the scope of that statement and speaks of occupying oneself in the Torah and its mitzvahs. There's Contras Acharon on the Alter Rebbe's Hilkos Talmud Torah 4:3, which explains that the fundamental new insight is that one may study Torah for the sake of reward. This point, and not the application of the concept with regard to mitzvos, is primarily necessary to teach. The implication that is taken for granted that the concept applies regarding mitzvos. You know, in general, when we study the Word of God and we study Torah, it's it's lishma, like not without desire for a reward. You should, there's a concept of, working for the master for a reward and just doing your work for the master without a reward. And we should do it lishma, but it's coming here out saying that it's okay. Like a kid when they're young, as two of the points, a major point last week on our learning was chinuch, which is the education for the children. It's like a kid, to get them kind of to do something, you kind of give them a little candy, and it's like a reward for them. As we're a little bit older, we shouldn't require that candy, but that candy kind of gets them there. And it's like, that's not the reason why we want to do things, but it's okay. The concept almost kind of like fake it till you make it. You know what I'm saying? So then maybe at one point you'll have the desire and drive to do those things as we continue along with this Hilkos Teshuvah, and the order of instruction must follow this pattern. It says here that Children should be taught solely in order to receive a reward until their knowledge grows, as we were just saying there. As their wisdom increases, this secret, and this secret refers to serving God entirely for his sake, this lishma concept that we're talking about. And with God's help, we'll go back and get some previous commentary. I got some clips on the lishma that I'd really like to share with you, who revealed this secret that the pledge we will do should precede the pledge we will listen, to my children. So continuing along here, it says this secret should be revealed to them. It also says it can be said that these two secrets, serving God for his sake and stating that we will do, should proceed the pledge we will listen, are dependent one on the other. The pledge that the Jewish people took in the beginning. So you reveal it to them slowly, bit by bit. They should gradually be trained in this concept, serving God for his sake, okay? And in his commentary on the Mishnah, it's saying here that as we give it to them slowly, their wisdom increases, and afterwards, this secret then should be revealed. And others that read, their wisdom increases and this secret should be revealed. A little bit of semantics there, but now we're talking about, and the Kesser Shem Tov, the Bel Shem Tov explains that serving God for a personal intent is acceptable in the initial stages of a person's avodah, like their divine service. So, it's like everything's in the concept, like it's madrega, like it's like in steps, like stairs, like we don't just like hop up to our personal service in God, we like kind of work our way up little by little. There's concept of like milk and then meat, or however that works, but we just take steps and times, and that's how we can add into our avodah. And in his commentary on the Mishnah, Rambam elaborates further on this subject, saying that those who are yet to realize the truth to the extent that they serve God as Abraham, our patriarch, did, Abraham. And Rambam describes Abraham as the paradigm of one who serves God out of love with no ulterior motive. May we all acquire such a level, i.e., performing mitzvos and doing good deeds and connecting to God without an expectation of a reward should be encouraged. Regarding this, the observance of the mitzvahs for the sake of a reward and their intent should be reinforced. Needless to say, despite all the above statements, when one carries out a mitzvah only for the sake of its reward, his observance is certainly lacking perfection in the fulfillment of the mitzvah, since he is not observing it for his own sake. Furthermore, even when one fulfills a mitzvah in order to carry out the command of his creator, but does so with the intent that it will also bring him benefit, for example, he gives charity, the tzedakah, so that his son will live, or so that he will receive a portion in the world to come, as we learn in Gemara Pesachim 8a and b. Although he is perfectly righteous in this act, this is still not the perfect manner to observe the mitzvos. Now, by contrast, with regard to the protection afforded by a mezuzah, it can be said that since this is not a reward for the observance of a mitzvah, but a direct result and component of the mitzvah itself, there is no lack in the perfect observance of the mitzvah if it is performed for the sake of protection. That consequence is an integral element of the mitzvah. Furthermore, as mentioned above, based on the wording of Tosafos, this is the very purpose of the mitzvah, is intended for the sake of protection. Furthermore, one of the reasons, Gemara's Menachos 33b, that a mezuzah must be affixed on a doorpost within the handbreadth closest to the public domain is so that it affords protection. This means that not only may one have this in mind when affixing a mezuzah, but this defines the manner in which one actually observes the mitzvah. And this is also reflected in the fact that, as stated above, God's name, Shaddai, written on the outside of the mezuzah, is an acronym for the Hebrew words meaning guardian of the doors of Israel. And this states that God's name Shaddai is an acronym for the Hebrew words meaning guardian of the dwellings of Israel. We learned in Zohar, volume 3, page 266, that God's name Shaddai is written on the outside so that a person will be protected from all sides, from the inside and from the outside. And Rabbeinu Bakia, according to Deuteronomy in the 6th chapter, 9th verse, in your day at the end of section 285, which states that whenever a person leaves his home, he should place his hand on the mezuzah and say, God is my protector. There are many other sources that speak about the writing of the name Shaddai on the mezuzah. Very beautiful and implicit, just wonderful words. Please just go, if you don't know what I'm talking about, just please Google Mezuzah. You can see all of this. You can see how they make it. The information that's available to us in these times is absolutely amazing, as the Torah states when elaborating regarding on this matter. Now, is it for us or for him? Okay, number 3, on the surface, an issue arises after saying the above law regarding the placement of the mezuzah. The Torah itself concludes, nevertheless, a person who fulfills the mitzvah of mezuzah should solely have a mind to fulfill the mitzvah of the Creator. Blessed be He who commanded us concerning it. This appears to indicate that one should not attend that the mezuzah is being affixed for the sake of protection. Nevertheless, the Torah does not say that it is forbidden to have protection in mind. Furthermore, it is not logical to say that the Torah's implication is that while fulfilling the mitzvah of mezuzah, one should not at all have the intent that it afford protection. Since it is mentioned above, the mitzvah is fulfilled through an action that indicates that the purpose of the mitzvah is protection. How much more so is it permitted to have such an intent? Rather, with these words, the Torah is only negating that when fulfilling the mitzvah of mezuzah, one should not have the intent that he is fulfilling it for the benefit and the protection the mitzvah affords. Instead, one should be willing to fulfill the mitzvah with the same desire and meticulous care, even if it did not afford protection at all. A mezuzah must be affixed for the purpose of fulfilling the mitzvah of the Creator. That said, at the time one carries out the mitzvah, he may have in mind that implicit in the mitzvah is that God commanded the Jews to carry out an act that brings protection for their homes. Moreover, even when one fulfills the mitzvah solely for the sake of the benefit of the protection it affords, he is fulfilling the mitzvah, albeit not for the sake of the mitzvah. Even then, since this is his level of knowledge and understanding, he should, as Rambam states, be encouraged regarding this, and his intent should be reinforced. Harsh criticism, number 4. On the surface, an issue can be raised regarding the above Rambam rules, and his ruling is quoted by the Torah. Those who write the name of the angels on the inside of the mezuzah are among those who do not have a portion in the world to come. Not only do these fools nullify the mitzvah, but furthermore, they make a great mitzvah seem as if it was a talisman for their own benefit. In other words, concerning a mezuzah, a talisman for their own benefit, i.e. for the sake of protection, does not merely involve the failure to observe a mitzvah for its own sake. But it is also foolishness. Furthermore, is it mamashtus? Foolishness, whatever. Furthermore, one who fulfills a mitzvah with such an intent is among those who do not have a portion in the world to come. Rambam's words nullify the mitzvah, i.e., if you need a source for that, that's in Sadeh Hamed Chalalim, Maracas Mem Kalal 114, and Rambam's words are discussed there. Rambam's words nullify the mitzvah, i.e., that it is as if the mezuzah is invalid or not relevant in the case at hand, an instance where a person affixes a mezuzah for the sake of protection. Rambam is not speaking about the mezuzah being disqualified because of the person's intent, that he made a great mitzvah, a talisman, but because he added names of angels and the like inside the mezuzah. In such an instance, Rambam rules in the halakha that proceeds to one side, if one adds even one letter inside on the parchment of the mezuzah, it is disqualified. Like inside the mezuzah itself, one may not add anything because it appears as if he intends to make a talisman for protection by doing so. And Rabbeinu Asher makes similar statements. He though does not write that he nullifies the mitzvah by making these additions, because he also, the Torah, adds even one single letter inside on the parchment of the mezuzah is disqualified. These sources only state that it is forbidden to add anything on the inside of the mezuzah, but do not state that doing so disqualifies mezuzah. But that's not really what we're talking about specifically here, although it is noted. Thus, the words which Rambam adds, they make a great mitzvah talisman, are not stated as a reason why the mitzvah is disqualified, but also as a separate added point, an explanation and rationale why such a person is among those who do not have a portion in the world to come. Let's take a quick second here. I'm not really familiar with this term. It's like this talisman is like interesting. It's like that. I was watching a movie on Tisha B'Av, and I was talking about how, like, the people in Jerusalem, right? Some of them, because so many people have been killed there, they thought that there were like Jewish demons. So they like put this like thing at the corner of their house. I don't know. It's like a talisman. It's like some type of artifact. But this mezuzah, when we put it on the doorpost of our gate, this isn't like a good luck charm. This isn't like we can't transform it into this object like a ring or a carved stone that is believed to bring good luck and grant power or keep a person safe from harm, like a magical symbol, or this is like a commandment from God that provides protection. So we're looking at the intellectual takings and undertakings of that being that, but still not being a good luck charm as it goes on the doorpost. That's why I keep reaching up here if you don't know what I'm talking about. The doorpost, and when we leave it, our intention is not like, our intention is that God protects us. This Shaddai is our protector, and that's on the outside, protecting inside and outside of the home. Written these words on this parchment, but adding one letter changes it into an object that is not acceptable. Number 5, more may one intend that it's a mitzvah to bring protection. So number 5, in truth, however, Rambam's wording cited above cannot be interpreted as meaning that the prohibition stems only from fulfilling the mitzvah for an intent other than fulfilling God's will and using the mezuzah for protection for one's own benefit, in addition to the fact that it is difficult to say that this will cause a person to be considered foolish. Since, as mentioned, a mezuzah was made for protection. That's what we talked about here. The mezuzah is mamish made for protection. Gemara Menachos 44a. It is particularly difficult to say that such a person should be included among those who do not have a portion in the world to come. After all, Rambam explicitly states in the Hilkos Avodos Kavakim 11:12, it is permitted for a healthy person to read verses from the Tanakh, so that the merit of reading them will protect him. In other words, one may use the words of the Torah for protection. Rambam does not say that by doing so, one makes the Torah like a talisman, this thing for his own benefit in that instance. Thus, clarification is needed regarding why Rambam so strongly criticizes affixing a mezuzah for personal protection. Rambam himself explains this matter after the words, as if it was a talisman for their own benefit. He adds, they, in their foolish conception, think that this benefit will benefit them with regard to the vanities of the world. And all of us, as we've learned in previous sikhas, we have to be careful and watch for a literal, figurative gambling of taking a chance and making choices in this world that could forfeit us a longer inheritance that we have, that's promised to us, that we make a choice in this world that does not favor this further outcome for fitting a whole inheritance. You think you're going to stay at work for just a few more minutes on Shabbat day, God forbid, and then you give up, you trying to get $2 and give up your whole eternal portion. These vanities of the world, we're all struck by them. It's not people just struggling on Shabbat observance. It's not just us that are running for $1. It's God tells us to work. It's not those of us who, you know, these vanities of the world. In other words, by writing the names of angels and the like in a mezuzah, even though a kosher mezuzah itself affords protection, these individuals demonstrate that they do not regard a mezuzah as a mitzvah at all. For were that the case, why would they think of adding to God's mitzvah? By contrast, when God's name Shaddai is written on the outside of the mezuzah, this does not detract from the mitzvah, since an addition is made on the outside. It's like the scroll is like open, and then as it rolls up, it's on the outside. Sorry if you're advanced and don't need these things. One of the biggest challenges of the YouTube broadcast is we don't know specifically who that we're speaking to. So I try to always make it as basic and always as advanced as we can. But the two people, when they're sitting in the same time, it can be a little bit difficult. But the protection he brings about, instead they regard it as a talisman for their own benefit. In other words, they construe its entire purpose as being for their own benefit, which they associate with the vanities of this world, trying to make it come up in this world, trying to get things of this world, vanities and falsehood and hope. This is the foolishness of their approach. Mezuzah affords protection only because it is a mitzvah. That is what brings about the protection. By contrast, when adding the names of angels and the like in the mezuzah, these people demonstrate that they are fooling themselves and thinking that the protection does not result from the mitzvah, but from it being a talisman for their own benefit. Therefore, they think that this will help them with regard to the vanities of the world. Accordingly, they do not have a portion in the world to come. Now, to cite a parallel, Torah law, okay, considers those who regard the words of Torah as if they are cures for the body to be among those who deny the Torah, because the Torah is solely a cure for souls. This requires some in-depth thoughts here. Now, Rabbeinu Asher writes in brief, inside the mezuzah itself, one may not add anything because it appears as if he intends to make for himself a talisman for protection. The fact that he admitted Rambam's words that such a person, A, does not have a portion in the world to come, B, is a fool, and C, thinks that this will benefit him with regard to the vanities of the world, implies that intending that a mezuzah serve as protection is in and of itself, i.e., even if nothing is added, forbidden according to Rambam. However, the emphasis implied by the phrase a talisman for protection indicates that what is forbidden is only having the intent that the mezuzah is not a mitzvah, but this talisman, this article of like, mamash, a good luck charm. And you know, we're just people, you know, we're just like, the conclusion of Rabbeinu Asher's words, and said he should carry out the mitzvah as prescribed with the intent of fulfilling the words of the Creator, blessed be He, and He will protect him, and He is our shadow on our right side. And it's like slightly different, it means like will save us, He will protect him, and He will save him. And on our right side does not mean that a person should think about the protection at all, but on the contrary, this itself, that the mitzvah affords protection, should be a part of the person's intent. that he is observing a mitzvah that will, as a result, cause God to protect him. Rabbeinu Asher omitted Rambam's severe words of criticism because he is also speaking about an instance when a person did not intend that the mezuzah serve as a talisman. Even in such an instance, it is forbidden to make any additions inside the mezuzah because it appears if he intends to, make this, thing into a talisman. Now, by contrast, a person who affixes a kosher mezuzah and does not add anything to the mezuzah, but while fulfilling the mitzvah, has in mind that he is observing it because he desires the protection the mitzvah affords. To add a further point, if the person did not add the names of angels and the like inside the mezuzah, even if he had the intent that the mezuzah is a talisman for his own benefit, that will benefit him with regard to the vanities of the world. It is not clear if Rambam would maintain that the mezuzah is disqualified for that reason. It's possible to say that according to Rambam, although a person who does this is foolish and will not receive a portion in the world to come, nevertheless, the mezuzah remains kosher, affords, should at most be considered as one who does not fulfill a mitzvah for its own sake. Now, Kesef Mishnah addresses the apparent contradiction between Rambam's statements that appear to negate the concept that a mezuzah affords protection and those of the Talmud that state it is made for protection. In his second resolution, he writes, when affixing a mezuzah, one's intent should not be to protect the house. Instead, one must intend to fulfill the mitzvah of the Holy One, HaKadosh, blessed be He, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As a direct consequence, the house will be protected. Now, it's possible to say that this Kesef Mishnah does not intend to say that according to Rambam, it is forbidden and foolish to have the intent that a mezuzah affords protection. Rather, Kesef Mishnah attempts to resolve Rambam's words. They make a great mitzvah as if it was a talisman for their own benefit. On the surface, the implication of Rambam's words is that the mitzvah does not lead to benefit, i.e., a mezuzah does not afford protection. This seems to contradict the Talmud's statement that it is made for protection. Kesef Mishnah offers two possible explanations to that resolution. A, true, the mezuzah protects a home when it is written in a prescribed. As prescribed, the angels whose names are written on the inside do not, i.e., a mezuzah to which the names of angels were added do not afford protection. And B, even when affixing mezuzah, one's intent should not be instead, but one must intend to fulfill the mitzvah of the Holy One, blessed be He. As a direct consequence, the house will be protected. The implication is not that a mezuzah does not offer protection, but that even a kosher mezuzah should not be viewed as a talisman, but rather as a mitzvah. It is only that because of the mitzvah, as a direct consequence, the house will be protected. In other words, the fact that as a direct consequence, the house will be protected is also an element of the mitzvah, and one should have this in mind when fulfilling it. This understanding parallels the explanation given previously here in footnote 33 regarding this Rabbeinu Asher's interpretation. And the angels whose names are written in the inside don't suffice with stating that a mezuzah protects a home when it is written as prescribed, because these names of angels were written inside. And it's important to add that also the angels' names who were included in the mezuzah do not afford protection, because were the angels to afford protection, i.e., the mezuzah would actually be a talisman. This is the opposite of Rambam's words, that only as if it were a talisman. And number two, there will be no clear proof that these people intended to treat the mitzvah as a whole as a talisman. It's possible that in their minds, only the added names of the angels were the talisman. Very, 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 very interesting. All right, so moreover, when he does not fulfill the mitzvah solely for the sake of protection, but he has a mind to fulfill God's mitzvah, the command to place an object that affords protection at the entrance of the home, he is fulfilling the mitzvah in a perfect manner. And once again, regarding the writing God's name Shaddai on the outside of the mezuzah, this does not detract from the mitzvah, even though the purpose of writing that name is protection inside and out. as we were just speaking about a minute ago, the protection a mezuzah affords, even when a mitzvah is not being fulfilled. Thanks for staying with us. We value your time. Based on the statements above, sections 1 and 2, that a protection afforded by a mezuzah is not a reward for performing the mitzvah or an added supernatural charm aside from the mitzvah, but rather an integral element of the mitzvah itself, it is possible to explain a perplexing phenomenon mentioned by the Talmud in connection with the mitzvah of mezuzah. In Tractate Kelim 1716, the Mishnah lists several utensils that contain receptacles and explain that they are susceptible to ritual impurity because of these receptacles. One of these utensils is a cane that contains a receptacle for a mezuzah. Interesting. Commenting on that mitzvah, Tosfos Yom Tov explains, it is possible that there were people in the era of the Mishnah who would carry a mezuzah with them, considering it like a mitzvah and something that would afford them protection. Doesn't sound so uncommon even in these times. The fact that the Mishnah speaks about a cane that contains a receptacle for a mezuzah for the sake of protection, and the idea is not negated. Tosafos Yom Tov's words, considering it, which imply that their conception was mistaken, referring to the words like a mitzvah, i.e. they erred in thinking that it would afford the protection of a mitzvah. Tosafos and Shem on that Mishnah, which negates the concept entirely here, implies that there is a basis for such conduct. Now they're saying that the Rebbe's father-in-law, the revered father-in-law, the Rebbe, had a mezuzah placed on the desk, which he wrote and studied. As we see Lakutei Sikos, volume 9, page 261, which mentions this fact. In truth, it appears and indeed is clear from the Talmud Yerushalmi, Pe'ah 1:1, and Breshis Rabbah, the end of chapter 35. That a mezuzah itself elicits protective influence even when it is not at all associated with the actual observance of this mitzvah. The Talmud Yerushalmi relates that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, our holy teacher, sent a mezuzah to Artaban, a non-Jew. There's a story, this Artaban, he was an important Jew. Some say that he is a non-Jew. Very interesting. Telling him that he sent them something that when you sleep, it protects you. In other words, even though the mitzvah of mezuzah does not apply to non-Jews, moreover, even a house owned in partnership with a non-Jew is exempt from requiring a mezuzah. Nevertheless, the protective influence of a mezuzah is relevant even in such circumstances. This is particularly true according to the conclusion of the story cited in the Shlitos, section 146, that text relates that this Artaban accepted the mezuzah, and it brought about protection, causing a she-demon that had triggered the sickness of his daughter to flee. From that story, we see that a mezuzah is associated with protection. However, this is perplexing. If the mezuzah is not being used for fulfill a mitzvah, why does it bring about protection? Or to refer back to the first instance, the fact that specifically a mezuzah was inserted into a cane indicates that it was used not merely because it was a passage from the Torah, which as a whole serves as a shield, but precisely to elicit the protective influence of a mezuzah. How is the protection elicited by a mezuzah relevant in such circumstances? The law, Menachos Gemara 32b, is that when one hangs a mezuzah inside a staff and an entrance to a home without affixing it to the doorpost, the mezuzah is invalid. Okay. Moreover, the Talmud explains, and Menachos once again emphasizes, that it invites danger and does not constitute the observance of a mitzvah. Now, Rashi, another explanation, explains danger from demons, since the house is not protected with it until it is affixed in the doorway as required by law. Now, True, the Talmud, Menachos, relates that the household of Munbaz would do so, i.e., hang mezuzos on staffs and the entrances of the ends where they would stay as a remembrance of the mezuzah. We find this practice in connection with several mitzvahs. A remembrance is used as a substitute when it is impossible to actually perform the mitzvah. For example, Pesach, Passover, the Zeroah is used on Pesach night, on Passover, as a remembrance of the Pesach sacrifice. And it's saying, in general, the commemoration of a mitzvah shares a certain degree of connection to the mitzvah. And this is evidence with the Zeroah, this shank bone used on the Seder plate, Pesach night. Since it has some connection to the Passover sacrifice, certain safeguards are enacted so that it will not actually resemble the sacrifice at all. Nevertheless, nowhere do we find it stated that employing a remembrance when one studies the laws of building the Beis HaMikdash may be granted speedily in our day. It is not merely a remembrance of the Beis HaMikdash instituted because, to paraphrase Gemara Rosh Hashanah 38, Sion Zion requires that concern for her be shown. Instead, fundamentally, the study of those laws was instituted because, as a result of that study, I will consider it as if you are involved in building the Beis HaMikdash. Accordingly, in contrast to other practices instituted as remembrance in this instance, one who studies these laws receives a reward as if he were involved in building the Beis HaMikdash. Akute Sikos, volume 18, page 412. And you can go into that concept in depth there of the mitzvah. Elicits the same reward as the mitzvah itself. Since I said we always try to touch everything, the people who are on the advanced level, God, if you're listening and you have those books, I've been saying for weeks and months that I always give those sources because you have those resources available to you. And it's a calling and an action call for us to go and seek out these sources if you have the books available. May God bless you as you look inside of the mitzvah. Elicits the same reward as the mitzvah itself. Now, the reason for that is clearly understood. True, a remembrance is comparable to and as consistent with the Torah, considered a commemoration of the mitzvah. However, the reward is connected with the actual fulfillment of the mitzvah. Based on the above, it is understandable why a mezuzah can bring protection, even when it does not involve the fulfillment of the mitzvah. Since the protection afforded by a mezuzah is not an ancillary matter, but connected with the mezuzah itself, it's possible to say that something comparable to such protection is vested in the mezuzah itself, even before the mitzvah is fulfilled with it, since it was written for the sake of a mitzvah, or even in the manner similar to the mezuzah given to Artaban. So a mezuzah in prison. Number 7. On this basis, we are also able to understand the implications of an extraordinary story that my revered father-in-law, the Rebbe, related. Sefer HaSikos 5702, page 82, about the time when he was held in prison. During his first cross-examination, the interrogator asked him if he knew where he was. In response, he answered, "Of course I know. I'm in a place that is exempt from a mezuzah." For there are places that are exempt from having a mezuzah. For example, a stable for horses. And it states that in that Talmudic era, that mezuzahs were affixed to the entrance of the stables. However, at present, such entrances are exempt because, as is evident, they contain excessive filth and a latrine. So I'm assuming that's a restroom. On the surface, the reason my revered father-in-law, the Rebbe, replied in this manner requires explanation. Why did he choose to answer using such wording that the place was exempt from a mezuzah? It would have been more appropriate for him to use a positive expression to say, for example, that he is in a place where, despite the concealment, divine providence is manifest. We've been talking about divine providence, this concept of hashgacha pratis, and the fact that if we that God is a natural God and like things work in a natural way, even you know, like a leaf blowing in the wind, because all things are affected by God's hashgacha pratis, in this divine providence. But there's the panimi hashgacha pratis, which is like God's hand actually like moving in our life, and as we make room for that. But that's not what we're talking about here. But we want to review that concept just quickly there for you, in case you missed it last week. The Mamarim delivered on Rosh Hashanah of that year, it was 5687, and 5786. That was 99 years ago. I mentioned the Bel Shem Tov's approach to this hashgacha pratis, which is what I'm telling you about here, that encompasses not only humans, but all forms of existence, even inanimate objects, plants, and animals, and every detail of their being. Although this concept did not have any apparent connection to this mimer, were it not for mentioning these points, I do not know whether I would have been able to endure to bear the suffering and survive that imprisonment, is what they were saying about the Rebbe's father-in-law, the Rebbe. Very interesting, and very interesting that we had just learned these things. In particular, the answer would have been most appropriate, since while relating the details of his imprisonment, what happened both before the interrogation and afterwards, he emphasized that the entire earth is full of God's glory, as we learn in Yeshayahu, which is the book of Isaiah, 6th chapter, 3rd verse, and similar ideas. This is especially true since, as he mentioned several times, my revered father-in-law, the Rebbe, made a point of taking a forceful stance, showing the Russian interrogators and prison authorities that he did not reckon with them at all, that if it was as if they did not exist, that they were utter nothingness and void. As such, seemingly it would have been more appropriate to note the positive subject matters mentioned previously. However, it could be said that also there in prison, my revered father-in-law, the Rebbe, wanted to elicit the protective influence of a mezuzah, since there it was not possible to fulfill the mitzvah in a simple sense. He did what he could to substitute a remembrance of the concept of a mezuzah. Furthermore, he spoke of the laws of a mezuzah, and through this, evoked influence resembling its protective shield. Therefore, he related and clarified Kanye Garris HaKadosh, Epistle 26, 144b, which extols the virtue achieved through clarifying halakha on this physical plane, stating a thinker will understand the extraordinary matter. Note that the interrogation room was exempt from the requirement of a mezuzah because it was not your house, the place where a Jew lived. By contrast, a barn is not only exempt from the mitzvah of mezuzah, but is also forbidden to affix mezuzah there because of the filth. Nevertheless, the Rebbe Ra'atz compared the two. This is not the place where we're going into a very deep discussion of that. But the law that the place where he was located was exempt from the requirement of a mezuzah. In this way, he brought about a connection to the idea of the mezuzah in a twofold manner. A, by studying the laws of mezuzah from the ruling of our sages, Menachos 110a. Anyone who occupies himself in the laws of is considered as if he offered. One could infer that speaking about the laws of mezuzah is comparable to fulfilling the mitzvah of mezuzah. B, by clarifying the halakha, he specified that the building where he was located, even though structurally it was in the category of a building to which to charge, you shall write them on your doorposts of your home. This is from Deuteronomy, 6th chapter, 9th verse. In contrast to the prison where the Rebbe Ra'atz was held, there are structures that are fundamentally exempt from having a mezuzah. Example is a structure that is not 4 cubits by 4 cubits and the like a small area. Applied was exempt from the requirement of a mezuzah, and by doing so, he brought about a connection not only to the laws of a mezuzah, but also the mitzvah of mezuzah. True, the connection was a negative one. The building was exempt from having a mezuzah, but even highlighting such a connection elicits divine influence. Be of sincere faith, Deuteronomy 18th chapter 13th verse, with God your Lord. Beyond the straightforward explanation of that verse, the Alter Rebbe focuses on the fact that tamim, translated of sincere faith, also means perfect, and explains that a person becomes complete, perfect in all 613 limbs of his soul to the fulfillment of the 613 mitzvahs. By contrast, if he is lacking one mitzvah, he is lacking one of the limbs of his soul. On the surface, there is difficulty since the 613 limbs of the soul correspond to the 613 mitzvahs in a situation where a person is unable to fulfill a given mitzvah. For example, in the era when the Beis HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, is not present or the like, it would appear that it is impossible for a person to be perfect in all the limbs of his soul. In resolution, can be explained that firstly, the very fact that a person is found in circumstances where it is impossible for him to fulfill these mitzvahs proves that he already fulfilled them in a previous reincarnation. In addition, it could be said that in such a circumstance, the perfection of the limbs of the soul that are dependent on these mitzvahs is achieved by A, studying the laws of these mitzvahs through which it is considered as if one fulfills those mitzvahs, and B, the very fact that one is fulfilling the Torah's instructions not to fulfill the mitzvah in these circumstances, for example, not to offer a sacrifice outside the Beis HaMikdash or the like, is an observance of the laws of the mitzvah. Very just amazing and deep and phenomenal. To use slightly different wording, there are two ways a structure can have a connection to the mitzvah of a mezuzah. A, the structure requires a mezuzah. In that instance, the connection is a positive one established by affixing a mezuzah to the entrance of the structure. Or B, the structure is exempt from having a mezuzah. In that instance, the connection is a negative one. One carries out the Torah's command by not affixing a mezuzah. There it is possible to say that this is the reason my revered father-in-law, the Rebbe, chose to say that he was in a building that was exempt from the requirement of a mezuzah. With the statement, he elicited some degree of the protective influence of a mezuzah. Now, a mezuzah for every Jewish door, page 184, number 8, from everything explained previously, we can appreciate the great merit brought about endeavoring to publicize the mezuzah campaign. It must have been one of the hara'as in those days, and Jews were one lamb among 70 wolves, as it says here, according to Midrash Shankuma, Parshas Todo, section 5, and their assistance comes not from natural means, but from the shepherd who saves and protects them. In particular, this applies after the recent events. Historically, there where we actually witnessed the homes of those who were harmed were lacking in the fulfillment of the mitzvah of mezuzah, and the Rebbe was referring to this terrorist attack of Ma'alot in Eretz Israel. The year was 5736. In the regular calendar, we know that is 1976. 25 Jews were killed. And the Rebbe spoke about this at length in Shabbos Parshas Matos Masai in the 29th of Tammuz and Shabbos Parshas Chazan in that year, 5736. As mentioned, the name of God written on the outside of the mezuzah, so that can be seen when the mezuzah is rolled, closed, as Shaddai, an acronym for guardian of the doors of Yisrael. This name and the protection it elicits was lacking for those individuals. Guardian of the doors of Israel. It's not on the inside of the mezuzah, it's on the outside so that it doesn't change it. And you're protected from all sides, from the inside and from the outside. And when we leave the home, we touch that, and he should place his hand on the mezuzah and say, God is my protector. This name and the protection it elicits was lacking for those individuals. In light of the above, it is evident that the greatest efforts possible must be made so that every Jewish home have a mezuzah on the door that requires one, and that these mezuzahs be affixed as required by halakha. It is necessary to reach out both to men and to women, for women are obligated to affix a mezuzah just as men are. Mishnah Barakos 20b. In particular, this is true in light of the Talmud in Gemara Kedushin 34a and Yoma 11b. The rhetorical question regarding a woman's obligation to affix a mezuzah: men need life, but women do not need life. And we see in Milim to Ram edition of the Shulchan Aruch, Yaredei 8, section 285, that for this reason, that their lives are dependent on it, the mitzvah of mezuzah takes precedence over other mitzvahs in which women are obligated. And for men have other mitzvahs, for example, Torah study and tefillin, through which they can attain the blessing of long life. Furthermore, since women are the mainstays of the home, they are entrusted with a special responsibility to see all the matters of the home, including the protection of the home brought about by the mezuzahs of the home. Through this, protection is elicited for the home and for all those who live in the home. Moreover, as stated in Zohar, Volume 3, page 263, Rama Yoredei 285-2, a mezuzah leads to divine protection. God will guard your going and your coming from now and for all eternity. According to the book of Psalms, we call it Tehillim, 121st chapter, 8th verse. Not only at home, but even when you leave. Since the entire Jewish people are responsible for each other, according to Gemara Shavuos 39a, and the Jewish people as a whole are one single entity, Lakutei Torah Devarim, page 44a, it is understood that adding to the observance of the mitzvah of mezuzah and including every single room that requires a mezuzah increase the protection of the entire entity, shielding the entire Jewish people and every individual, Jew, man, woman, and child, wherever they are found, to use the wording of the scripture, Tehillim, which is the book of Psalms, 121st chapter, 8th verse. God will guard your going and your coming from now and for eternity. Also, as we say l'chaim, we're not only saying l'chaim for our own personal blessing, but for all of Klal Yisrael, l'chaim, may we see blessings sprout forth, l'chaim. Let's take a quick look here at the Sound the Great Shofar, these essays on the imminence of the redemption. We finished I'm correct, we are on page 89. We are not. Thank you for joining. Thank you for subscribing. We did do Fulfilling Our Human Potential. So the message of the year 5752, spreading an awareness of God's wonders. It says here an adaptation of addresses from the Lubavitcher Rebbe Shlita during the early weeks of the year 5752. The publisher's foreword, it says here, as a preface to this essay, we would like to quote a passage from the publisher's foreword in a similar year. I think we already did this one too. We'll do it again if that's the case. Well, before the beginning of that year, Farbrengen of Shabbos Mavrachim Sivan 5749. We're going to have to close a little bit early this week. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable for you, God, my strength and my Redeemer. Look forward to seeing you next week and through this week. May every good thing be before you. God bless you and keep you. Every desire of your heart come true. Thank you for joining in. Thank you for subscribing.